I went to Korea, left Elizabeth in Brigham City with that wonderful ward that she was in, with some wonderful friends there in the ward who took very good care of her and watched over her, for which I will be forever grateful. Went to Korea, and I was in Korea, and I thought, why am I here? I spent 2 years away from Elizabeth on a mission, and now I'm away from her again. Here. There's got to be a reason. I prayed to Heavenly Father, and I got a feeling that this was from Him, and He had reasons for it. And He did. And in the first morning when I got up in Korea, I looked around, and there was something incongruous out there. I'm in Korea. This is Asia. And everywhere I look, there's a big Presbyterian church. A Presbyterian church that looks like a Presbyterian church. You know, big high steeples, and they look at there's a Celtic cross on top. I mean, all the stuff. It was that. And I served my mission in Scotland, where the Presbyterian Church is the Church of Scotland. It's the church and the state there are united. And this church is supported by the taxes of the people. And it is the official church of the state. And they run the schools, and they do all kinds of stuff as an arm of the government, and has been forever. And there they were in Korea. That was fascinating to me. Mm-hmm. I found out after that why. And there was a guy named Howard Moffat, who had been born in Pyongyang, Korea. That's the capital of North Korea. And he had grown up there in a missionary family of doctors. These are all doctors who are missionary doctors. And he went to Yale University, because that's where they all trained. Went to Yale University and got his doctor's degree there, and was sent back to Korea. And there in Korea, he was serving as a doctor and a missionary when the North Koreans made their invasion, and he was there when they made it. He has all kinds of stories about it, but when it was all over, he stayed there, and he built hospitals. He was a wheeler-dealer, doctor, whatever, and a special blessing to the people there. And so he raised millions of dollars all over the world and built a huge hospital, the Dongsan Byongwon, the big Presbyterian hospital in Daegu. And I taught English in that hospital to some of his doctors every night. That was kind of exciting. And I taught another class of his nurses every night. And we had the missionaries in, and they taught the people. We were teaching them English, so we had missionaries teaching them English, because the missionaries we had could speak English as though it had been their first language, which is so strange, because some of them came from Panguitch, Utah, and some of them came from Preston, Idaho. But, you know, they still claimed to speak English, but I knew, because coming from Polktail, Idaho, the purest English is spoken in Idaho. So anyway, but it was an exciting time. The church with me in Korea was fabulous. I built my testimony again, and it was like being a lot like on my mission again. And I'm going to tell you a story, just part of the thing. So I'm there I'll start off. As I came in country, I fly in to Seoul, Korea. There's a big military base, big army base there in Seoul called Yongsan. And that's where we sat down, and there was a general. The general's plane was there. The generals in the army have planes. They're their own private plane. They have their own private pilots and everything else, but they use that for all sorts of things, hauling officers around the country a lot. And I'm there, and so there's 2 other junior officers, 2 other lieutenants, and a major, and me flying in the general's plane back down from Yongsan to Daegu, which is a city of several million that people don't know about, but those cities have lots of people. most of the way down the peninsula. And as we got on the plane, there were the major and a couple of us, and he was a very nice man. He said, "Now, where are you guys from? And, where'd you go to school?" And I told him University of Utah, and he said, "University of Utah in Salt Lake?" I said, "Yes." He said, "You're a Mormon?" I said, "I certainly am." He said, "You've got it made." I said, "What do you mean I've got it made?" He said, "In the Army, we normally call it the West Point Club. And the West Point Club are those guys who went and got their commissions from West Point, because they will become the generals. Most of the generals are West Point guys, and the high, colonels and stuff, mostly West Pointers." Mm-hmm. He said there's another group here that have even a stronger group, and that's called the Mormon Church. He said, "Wherever you go, you've got family. You'll arrive, I'll arrive. They won't even know I'm coming. I'll have to make do. I'll figure my way out. This is good. I do it all the time. You will come, and the family will be there. You'll be welcomed in. You'll have your social life established. You'll have to have activities everywhere. People take care of each other. There's no question. It's just like you're at home. You're going to have a whole group who do nothing but just make your life fun, and you'll make their life fun, and you've got family waiting for you." I said, "I'm awfully sorry, sir. I don't want to disappoint you, but I don't think a soul knows I'm coming." And he said, "We'll see." Well, at the end of the flight, when we got down, and the door opened, and we got out, and a soldier walked up to me, and he said, "Brother McComber?" I said, "Yeah, I'm Howard McComber." He said, "Great, I'm Alvy Remington. Just want to invite you in to tell you that we've got a great thing, and we're hoping that, we're trying to make things wonderful for you." And right then, because he's saying it right out loud there, the major's right there. The major looks over at me and winks. There it was. And it was true. There was a wonderful group of LDS people. Part of them were Air Force, and part of them were Army, and we had a little, what we call a servicemen's group there, and it was wonderful, and it was just an exciting thing, and there it was for me. And the very first meeting that I had, when they took us down there, they have a general's mess for the general and the top colonels and stuff. They have their own food dining room, and it is very well done, and everything in it is really sharp. And they let all of us officers who arrive have a dinner there when we first come in country, and we meet the top staff, so that we meet who our bosses all are. So I was there, and a man walks up to me, big tall guy, taller than me, and his name was Colonel Flynn, and he was a full colonel with an eagle on each shoulder, that sort of thing. And he had a dossier in his hand and finally said, "Lieutenant McComber." I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "I have your file here. It says in here that you're a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Is that right?" I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "Are you a practicing member?" I said, "I do my absolute best." He said, "Great. I'm going to replace a Mormon captain with you." I said, "Yes, sir." Now, this is personnel work. I knew nothing about personnel work. He really didn't care. He cared that he had an LDS officer replacing the officer that he had.
Wow.
And that was all the only requirement he had was sort of like talking to, the bishop. You had a little, interview, but you could get a temple recommend, and it had nothing to do with anything else but your worthiness. And that's all he was looking for me. That was it. Tapped me and said, "You're mine," and that was it. And he was wonderful, and it was a great blessing. And he had a problem. He was in charge of all the personnel for the entire support command for the Army in Korea, which meant he handled all the personnel. He was the human resources guy, and he was on the general staff. And so by being under him, I also carried general brass insignias on my uniform, which meant to everybody else, "Watch out, this guy is from the top headquarters." I mean, that's what it really means. They have an official something else, but that's what it means. And so there we were, and he said, I'm replacing a GS-13 and a colonel with you. I said, yes, sir. I mean, that's pretty heavy. He said, you're going to do their job, and I think you'll do it right. The general doesn't like their work, and so I have to replace them, and you're it. I said, yes, sir. And he said, we've had Incheon. Incheon is where General MacArthur came ashore and won the war, as far as we're concerned, with Korea, and established headquarters and a military base there that we have now turned over to the Republic of Korea. But we're in the process of doing it. We haven't turned it over yet. We're still working on that. And you're the officer who's going to write up the actual nuts and bolts of turning it over to the Republic of Korea. And he said these other guys have been working for months on it, and the general just threw all of their paperwork against the wall, said a few things, and said, again, this isn't going to go. And so there it was. So there I was taking the job with these two guys, and they were both much senior to me, because I was at that point still a second lieutenant. He got me promoted on the spot, because I should have been promoted before, and he just made sure that all happened. Of course, he was in charge of personnel. Not too hard for him to do that, and he did it. So there I am, working at that. And there's two things. He knows I'll work very hard, and I will be sober all the time, which helps with the level of work that's done. So leave that at that point. At any rate, there we were, and we had an interesting time. And as I'm working at that job, I'm in the church group. I'm one of the counselors to the president of our little church group. They need someone to go to Yongsan, to our church headquarters, because they're having a meeting up there, sort of like it's an information meeting where they're passing out information and data to take back to the groups. And Sergeant Smith said, Brother McComber, we'd like you to go and take care of that for us. I said, certainly. And so I checked, and sure enough, the plane for the general was going to be flying up again from Daegu to Yongsan. And so I thought, well, that's pretty good. So I got in, did the things I had to do, and got onto the plane. And the plane was packed. And I was the last guy on, and I was a lieutenant, and it was full of colonels, a general, some colonels, and maybe a couple of captains, I don't know, maybe a captain, and me. And I'm right by the door. And we fly up, and as we land, I think, oh my heavens, everybody has to get past me, and we're crammed in here. So the door opened, and I just slipped on out and stood down at the bottom. And nobody came out. Took quite a while. And then the general came out, followed by the colonel, the full-bird colonel, who was chief of staff. And he came down and stood right in front of me and said, Lieutenant McComber, and I, of course, immediate, of course, to attention and did all. He said, is this the first time you've ever flown with the general? I said, yes, sir. I've never done this before in my life. He said, I thought that. I just wanted to explain this. We had two generals. This was General Brower. He was a 1-star. The 2-star was a tough guy. And he said, it doesn't matter to me a whole lot, because I'm not much hung up on this sort of thing. But if you'd done this for the other general, he'd have your hide for that. I said, I've done something wrong. He said, yes. Let me explain. We always let the senior officer on the plane first, and the senior officer comes off the plane first. And if we have a general on the plane, we're very careful about that. I said, oh, sir, I really do apologize. He said, that's no problem. Like I say, it isn't a big thing for me. Of course, the colonel's right behind his elbow, and it looks like it's a big thing to the colonel. But this guy, Brower, was being nice. And he said, what are you coming here for? I said, well, actually, I have a church meeting at Yongsan when I can get to Yongsan with my church group. He said, it's a funny thing. I'm going to Yongsan. Of course, it's a funny thing. It's headquarters. He's going to headquarters. He said, I'm going to headquarters. Maybe you'd like to come with my chief of staff and me there. I'd be happy to give you a ride. Would that be all right? I said, oh, sir, that'd be wonderful. He said, great. And the colonel still looked at me. But we went over. There was, of course, his chopper waiting for him. I'm very careful to let him and the colonel both get on. Then I get on. And then we fly and sit down somewhere elsewhere in Seoul. And as we sit down, of course, there is a car, a special sedan there waiting for the general. And they have what they call, there's little flags on the general's car. And they uncase the flags in that, and it has a star on it. And that means something to everybody. And in Korea, it meant the same thing it did in the military, because they were all one. So I got into it, and that meant that everything, including fire department and the police, would pull aside for you. And we drove, and as we drove through crowded Seoul, everything opened up in front of us. I don't know if we had an escort in front or not. All I know is that all the police on the way could see us coming, because we were very obvious, and just shoot everybody else out of the way and cleared the road so we could just sail on through. So he sailed on through and went onto the compound, which of course was just a bunch of saluting from the MPs as the general drove on. Mm-hmm. And then he said, well, is there someplace particular? I said, sir, I'm sure if you drop me off anywhere, that would be just fine. He said, okay, have a wonderful time, Lieutenant. I said, thank you, sir. And the colonel said, goodbye. So I got out of the car and several fun things. We went to it was a wonderful meeting, and we got the information that we needed, and I picked up a book at the bookstore, which was a pleasant thing. And then when it's all over, then I have to get back. And I realized there's no plane going back. I have to take the train home. And so I said, okay, well, I've said my prayers and did my best and came out of the camp, out of the fort, onto the sidewalk. Of course, it's right in the middle of the city. Lots of people on the sidewalk. And I hadn't walked 50 feet, probably 30 feet maybe. And a Korean comes up to me and he said, brother, you need some help, in English. And I said, oh, yes. He said, exactly what do you need? I said, well, I'm trying to get back down to, I've been to a church meeting here, and I'm trying to get back to Daegu. And he said, very good, I will help you with that. And he said, brother, and then he said what it was. He said, good. And obviously, he was a member of the church. And he said, I will take you there. I'll take you to the planes and to the train station and provide for you. And I said, how did you know that I was a member of the church? Because, this is the main compound. There's hundreds of soldiers everywhere, right? Mm-hmm. Dozens of us on the sidewalk. He walks over and says, brother, how can I help you? And I said, how did you know? He said, I could feel the Holy Ghost on you. And the Lord said, take care of him. And so that's why I'm here.
Wow.
And so I did. He took me up, and I couldn't read the signs because they're written in this kind of stuff that I don't read very well. Looks like spaghetti stirred. But anyway, I shouldn't say that, and I get in trouble when I say that thing. Uncle Jesse will get on my back. Anyway.
Okay.
Anyway, he bought my ticket. He talked to everybody. He made sure I got on the train. He put me on the train, and talked to the porter on the train and told him where to put me off. All of it. And then he left. Never saw him again. But I know for a fact, this is one of those things that helps build my testimony, which of course, I knew what was happening when it happened, and that was the Lord. And sure enough, when I arrived down in Daegu, and the porter had me come off the train, I walked out of the train station, and there was a military car and a sedan and a soldier there. I said, "Hi." He said, "Hi, how you doing?" We chatted a little, and he said, I said, any chance that you're going to go back up to the Camp Henry or any of those?" He said, "That's why I'm here. I'm just here to meet the train in case one of our guys is here, because it's really hard to get from here to there if you don't know it."
Uh-huh.
I said, "Thank you." And so he popped me into his car, and we drove back up to the fort. And that was just one of those wonderful experiences. I had lots of experiences, but that's got to be one. And that stepping off the post, first of all, getting there on time to the meeting by being flown with the general in his helicopter and his sedan is one. The second one was coming out, which was even bigger, not knowing anybody and being approached by someone who was a Korean who took care of me and put me on that train. And the reason he knew who I was is he could feel the Holy Ghost on me. He was being led by the Spirit to do this for me. That was so wonderful. And it was. And the Lord has been like that all through my life. My life is one continual blessing where the Lord has personally, very obviously, these aren't subtle things. That's not subtle. That's a miracle as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
And all my life I've lived by miracle after miracle. Greatest miracle, of course, is the gospel and the atonement. The second greatest miracle happened in a Logan Temple on the 25th of September, 1964. And then after that, there's been many other wonderful miracles. Those two, of course, are the greatest. But I had some great things in Korea. Now, I had a problem. I had been a little sloppy with my tithing. I paid my tithing in full every year. That I did.
Uh-huh.
But I didn't sometimes pay it immediately. And so I was back some on my tithing. I owed quite a bit of tithing, and I hadn't paid it. And I prayed to the Lord there in Korea, and I said, "Heavenly Father, if you'll help me to get it, I promise I'll always pay my tithing promptly." And then, how much time do we have?
We've got about probably another 17 minutes, and you can stop whenever you want or go all the way to that point.
Okay, I'll tell this story.
Okay, yeah.
So I prayed to Heavenly Father and told him that. And I was working in the colonel's personnel shop. And there was a guy named Ushijima. He was another lieutenant. And I was working in my office with our staff that was there. And he came in the office to gloat. He said, "I have got it. I have got the prime job of all time. I am going to be all over the country, enjoying the lap of luxury, seeing everything, doing everything, and getting TDY pay of $25 a day on top of everything else. And I'm going to be a VIP, and this is fabulous. I just want you ducks to know that while you're here slaving away, I'll be enjoying the life of Riley, and I've got it all made." And he gloated for a while, and he left. Didn't think a thing about it. 10 minutes later, he burst through the door and said, "McComber, what have you got on the colonel?" I said, "What are you talking about?" He said, "What have you got on the colonel? I lied, I connived, I cheated, I did everything I could. I got this assignment. I walk into the colonel and he gives it to you." I said, "Oh, is that right?" He said, "Yeah, it's not fair." I had nothing to do with it. The colonel does what he thinks is right. "Well, it's not right." Oh, and he stormed out. And the colonel came to me and said, "I hope you have a great time. This is good. You know, you're going to be a great example, and you'll really enjoy it." And I left. And I went up there to Yongsan, and they gave me 2 young people to escort. A young man and a young woman. They were not married. She was not married at all, and he was married to someone else. But they had a thing that they put together for the USO, a song thing. They did sort of country music and easy to listen to stuff, and they were very good. And they were going to be sent to little outposts to provide entertainment for troops who would not be able to come see the big shows. They had a lot of colleges who came. They put on shows for the USO. Bob Hope came, put on a big thing. That sort of thing. Just entertaining the troops. They go through Vietnam, then they come up and go through us. And it was kind of exciting. And these were wonderful. And we had a great time. We had some really exciting and fun experiences. Karen O'Callahan and Gary Edgington, that was their name. So we talked, of course, a lot about the church and a lot about this and that. And I took them places. Now, she was just as pretty as she could be. Very modest, very sweet, and they were very straight. Everything was up and up 100%. It was just fabulous. And we were going once to go to an outpost and put on a show. And as we were getting in the helicopter and being set in, she looks up and bats her eye at the sergeant and said, no, at the warrant officer, who's the pilot, and said, "Is this maneuverable?" He said, "What?" "I just wondered if this chopper was maneuverable." And I looked at the sergeant. I said, "Okay, I want you to go back and tighten everything up. I want to make sure everything on this load is super tight and in." And she looked at me and she said, "Why, Howard?" I said, "You made a remark like that to a guy like that? I know what we're in for." And the sergeant shook his head forward and just double-checked everything and tightened it right down. And we went off. Now, these pilots were bored. They'd been in Vietnam. They'd been doing death runs. And the one thing that you had in Vietnam was a lot of excitement. You were being shot at. Your gunners were shooting it down. These planes sometimes had a minigun on them, so they could shoot all kinds of stuff. So they were in combat. Combat's very exciting. And in Korea, there was nothing very exciting, and they kept having problems with them flying under bridges and through wires and stuff and everything, and then they crashed. And they crashed by doing daredevil things. And so that was the kind of a problem. They were just bored. And this guy looked back, this cute girl, and the guy who was with him and me was now white-lipped, because I know it's coming. And we did one of those flights. It was fabulous. We water skied on the South China Sea with our skids. Didn't make the fishermen like us much. They shook their fists at us and stuff because we were scaring their fishing.
Right.
If we'd caught one of those nets in our thing, it had been all over,
Right.
And we did all kinds. We were flying, doing the same thing with rice paddies, and we had to lift up to get over the dike around the things. You know what I'm talking about?
Uh-huh.
Then we went way out to sea. And then we came back up against Busan just as fast as we could go. There was a show on TV called, I think it was on New Orleans. It was in Florida, and the plane would fly right up and fly up over the top of a hotel there. It's just what they did at the beginning of every show. That was it. Beautiful flight, and coming in. Well, we did that here. And we went right up the front of a big hotel, and I think those blades weren't more than 2 feet away from that building. And we went straight up like a much more dramatic. And we went up 2,000 feet. I could tell because I could see the altimeter. And then he turned the airplane on its side, and we dropped like a rock. We were doing a fast pass with a chopper. They're not made for that. And down we come, then we swoosh out, and all kinds of stuff. And then after we'd done this, every kind of thing, then we were flying along, and we came down on a hill, but we came down a little hard. And they stopped, and we all got out, and I went over to the pilot, and I said, "They don't know anything, because they don't know what I know." "Okay, what happened up there?" He said, "Well, sir, we lost our hydraulics about 40 feet up." We had come down a little hard. Thank goodness we could have crashed and burned, but we didn't come that hard. But we came down hard.
Wow.
Bang. And they had to send another chopper out to get us. We didn't perform that day because they had to go get a big Chinook sometime somewhere to get the wreckage over to get it refixed. That was just one of those.
Uh-huh.
And we also did one up in the DMC. I got a letter back. From them, and they were sweet people. They'd been on another USO tour, and they said, "We miss you. We really enjoyed you. We really enjoyed just being with you." And I got one from Gary Edgington, and he said, "Just like you to know, Howard, I was baptized."
Wow.
Kind of nice. Just little things like that, Just how the Lord is so kind to us, and He blesses us in all our lives. That's the way. When I got through with the military, I came home.